It's draft time again. 2023 NFL draft to be precise. And we're in 2023. That's a good start, Dave.
Yes, sir. We are fully in it now. We're a week into the playoffs. I'm diving in. I'm writing multiple reports every single day, and every year I'm reminded this time of year that I just don't know how we get this done by March, April.
Somehow it happens.
We somehow do every time.
Well, that's the thing. You got to have a deadline, or else Yep.
Yeah. It lingers.
All right, so we are in our final phase of position rankings, early position rankings, and keep that in mind. These are early position rankings. So we are going to get these updated. Probably when? When do you think is your next official ranking update?
So this upcoming weekend, I will be putting together my next top 96. I put one together during the middle of the season. I put one together now.
Overall 96.
Overall 96, and that comes after I put together my actual stack. So that comes first. That'll be done prior to me releasing my top 96, and then I will update that top 96 once more after the scouting combine, after the All-Star games, probably about, I would say, a little around a month before the draft.
Okay. Now, we did get some viewer comments or questions, kind of a combination. Did you respond yet to Donald McKendry's recent? He actually talked about referencing he's a Bears fan.
The Bears. Yeah.
And that he did not. He does not. He's not interested at all in a nose tackle from Georgia, who we have, and you rightfully have boosted up as potentially the best player in the draft, Jalen Carter. For some reason, Donald isn't a big fan. So, and now look, everybody's entitled to their opinion when it comes to the NFL draft, and you have to wait. In my opinion, you got to wait 3, 4, 5 years before you can judge somebody's opinion on a player. Because it's so funny how often you can take a look at how, especially if a player is drafted like right ahead of another player, and if it's the same position, it's like that first year, if that one of those players is ahead of the other player, I told you. Then the next year it can like completely switch, and the next year it could switch again, and it's like, come on. Yeah. So you got to give it time. But my point is Donald is just one of those fans who is not interested in Jalen Carter.
And fully understand. And I'm in the position, like I said, to me, this draft, take the quarterbacks out of it. To me, this draft is Will Anderson, Jalen Carter, and then you're going to go down a couple steps.
Yes.
And then you have your next stack of guys. And I think Jalen Carter and Will Anderson, they'll be just 1 and 1A. And who you have 1 and who you have 1A, that's up to you. I wouldn't argue either side of it. Part of my argument for Carter is the size factor and the fact that defensive tackles in this NFL that we're watching right now, including this past Sunday, they're starting to have, not yet, but they're starting to have equal impact to the outside guys. I think the edge rusher, like we said last time, their ceiling, like the best edge rusher in the NFL, you're always going to want that over the best defensive tackle in the NFL. But that gap is getting smaller and smaller every year because of what offenses are doing to get the ball out quick. And Carter, his greatest trait to me is the explosion off the ball at that size. And that because of that, he's going to shrink the pocket on these passing games that want to get the ball out in 2.5 seconds, where even if you get your job done as an edge rusher, it's just hard to get there in that amount of time. There's fewer like 7-step dropbacks by quarterbacks, and there's just more urgency to get the ball out. That's why I think Carter and defensive tackle prospects in general are inching their way up to Will Anderson / the rest of the edge rushers.
Now, I completely understand, especially when you talk about some of the great quarterbacks that are getting older, the Tom Bradys, and everybody talks about the way to disrupt Tom Brady for the past 10 years is you got to do it up the middle. And a lot of quarterbacks were like that and are still like that. My question, though, is do you think that goes away more as more quarterbacks become more athletic and it's easier for them to escape the pocket, and then you want the outside guys to have the speed to catch them?
Yeah, that's a great point. That's another angle of looking at it where I could see someone saying, hey, give me the edge guy over the D tackle for that very reason. Young quarterbacks in the NFL in general is putting a little bit more value, not on a running quarterback, but someone that is capable of making plays on their own, not just running the ball, but also throwing the ball and escaping that initial pressure. And from that perspective, I could see, all right, you know what? Will Anderson and Jalen Carter, they're tied on my sheet. I'm going Anderson. Or even if you have Carter slightly above Anderson on your grading scale, you might still want to go Anderson for that very reason. So definitely a good thought there. With every year, you're going to see one of these veteran quarterbacks leave the NFL. We had Roethlisberger. Next, it's probably going to be Brady. Probably going to be Aaron Rodgers after that. And in their place comes the younger, more athletic quarterback. So absolutely, I could see that side of
it. One of the things that Donald brought up, though, was he critiqued Carter, his lack of stamina or laziness. This is something, and I'm not the scout you are, but this is something that I think we see an awful lot of certain players that I don't think, like I even heard it in the beginning of the year, going down to, what the hell is his name? Jets defensive tackle. Yeah,
Quinn Williams.
My superstar defensive tackle. I can't remember his name. So, and I think it was because he was on the sideline. He was out of breath a little bit, and they were like, "Oh, is he not? Is he not working out hard enough?" And so everybody tries to, I guess, look at what they see, and these appearances sometimes can be misleading. Now, maybe they're not for other players, but the whole laziness thing gets. I mean, Thibodeau was a guy that was tabbed with potentially being a little lazy. So when you hear that, as often as you've heard it, what are the percentages that it's been more true than just somebody's hyperbole?
Silly chatter. Yeah, I mean, hey, if you get the camera on the guy at the exact right time, you're gonna find pro football players out of breath and tired, especially when they weigh that much, right? I mean, this is not a small guy we're talking about. I'm very careful before I put that kind of label on someone. Stamina, you can watch, and it's not just, hey, he looks tired on the sideline. You can look at their pad level, especially against these college offenses that go no huddle, and you just can't get these guys off the field. So you can see the pad level, the juice. It's pretty easy to see on tape who's losing it as they go, and that is an issue. That's something we did see with Quinn Williams at Alabama, and he just made the R-Lads All-Pro team, first team at D-tackle, and it worked out okay. And it's funny, that's where I start to see Jalen Carter heading. It's that direction. It's Quinn Williams, and am I going to take a couple notches off of Jalen Carter's grade because there's a reputation that he's a little lazy? I need something more than someone in the media saying, I heard this or I heard that.
So is that happening? Are there members of the media that have said that?
Yes, and it's being fed to them. And you need to know this time of year
who to listen to and who not to.
Don't believe most of what you hear, because there are some teams in the NFL that are much better than this at others. They purposely will put information out on players to cause hesitation in the teams ahead of them to draft them. So that and it's worked. It does work. So until I get a confirmation from a really reliable source, I'm not going to put a laziness. I will talk about Jalen Carter's stamina, and I do think it's an issue. I think it's one of the red flags on his scouting report that needs to be fixed, much like Quinn Williams did it in New York. But I wouldn't say it's a big enough issue right now to say he cannot be a big-time player in the NFL. And Georgia rotates their defensive line as much as anyone. So him seeing a little less snaps than other guys, it's not necessarily the reason that his stamina got in the way.
All right, and then one more before we go and talk about the last on this show. It's the last few positions that we're going to talk about in these early rankings. It's going to be the linebackers, and it's not the edge rushers. If you want that, that's on our previous show. Linebackers and defensive backs, including corners and safeties. Before I get to that, Donald also wanted to know what you thought about Will McDonald.
Will McDonald,
because he wasn't on your list. Was he an honorable mention?
He was not an honorable mention. This is where the depth of the edge class this year, everyone I talked to says the same thing about it. It's probably going to be one of the deeper edge classes we've seen in a long time, meaning you're going to see a guy that's stacked around 14th or 15th that could be a credible 3rd or 4th round pick. Like you usually see those guys in round 5, round 6, round 7. You're going to see a lot of edge guys go in the top, I would say, 125 picks. McDonald's is one of the guys that's just off that list. Love the explosion, and I love the bend. That's a good place to start. He's got good length as well. I just don't love the body. I don't know if I see a power game. And again, in the NFL, that's one of the biggest contrasts you're going to see playing edge in college, playing edge in the NFL. You can be flat, fast, and explosive. It will help you out, but there's got to be a power element to your game. I don't see it in his yet. That's the one thing that I think prevents him from being, a second-round pick, even a third-round pick. I have a 4th, 5th-round grade on him right now. I don't see it changing unless there's something that pops up power-wise that I just haven't seen on tape yet.
All right, let's start. And I want to remind everybody, too, that in the coming weeks, we haven't figured out which show we're going to start with, but once we get closer to the draft, and it could be next month, we will start producing live shows. So this is going to give our viewers the opportunity to interact with us while we're on the air and ask questions like this as we're going through whatever we're talking about on the show. So make sure you subscribe to the channel, obviously, so you'll know when those shows will become live. And we always appreciate the comments, remarks, and so forth, because there are a ton of players to talk about. And at linebacker, we're going to start with Trenton Simpson from Clemson, who is he pretty much the definitely number one, no doubt about it, linebacker?
To me, yes. I don't see anything passing him. Guys that want a little bit more establishment from an instincts and run defending part of the game might put someone above Simpson. When you're drafting Simpson, you're drafting an athlete. He's a 4.4 kid, maybe even sub 4.4, that plays all over the field. Similar, not exactly like, but similar to what Isaiah Simmons did for them years ago. Different player, so I don't want to put that comp on him, but I brought that up because he just lines up everywhere. He's in the box. He plays a lot of slot. He's played some safety, and they do put him as an edge rusher in certain looks as well. He's a son of an Army Ranger, really good kid, bright kid. He's going to come in and work hard. And even though I see some roughness around the edges from the skill set and instincts perspective, like Simmons, I like to gamble on tools if I know the intangibles are there. And he does. He's got the intangibles. He's going to make up for so much with his speed. There are fast linebackers, and then there are guys like Simpson, kind of like in a league of their own.
So a lot's going to depend on what system he goes to, because he can play a variety of roles.
Exactly. The role will need to be, in my opinion, manufactured for him. I think Arizona did a poor job of this early on with Isaiah Simmons, but now they've kind of created almost like a slot corner role for him. That's really where he saw most of his snaps this past year.
That's best for him at the next level.
No, I think you need to manufacture the role. That really is what I mean by that. And Simpson, is he going to come in and be a C.J. Mosley for the Jets? If you put him in that role, you will not be happy. It will not work out. He'll make plays, but I think there's going to be too many bad plays in between the good ones. And so, yes, that's the one hesitation I have in saying, will he be the consensus number one? It's going to depend on the system.
All right, well, where do you think he'll excel at the most?
I think he's a guy that you put on the weak side, let him roam in space a little bit, give him some slot coverage responsibilities, spy the quarterback, follow the athletic running backs out of the backfield. He excels in man coverage. That's where I'm most impressed by him. He can play sticky. The footwork's great. The route anticipation is top-notch. So that's where I'd like to see him on the weak side, preferably in a 4-3 front.
Okay, so
as much help in front of him as possible.
Okay, so you don't believe that even though he's this elite athlete and he's got good blitz capability as well, that's not really where you see him excelling at the next level?
Yeah, if you're referencing like the Mike linebacker position, I don't think that's where he should be.
I agree with you 100%. Yeah.
He needs to be in space as much as possible.
Right. But you don't see him as an edge rusher. That's not his role. You don't say, I'm drafting him to be an edge rusher. No, you don't think that's where he's going.
No, I think he can be a weapon as a blitzing linebacker, but I don't see him as a pure edge guy. No.
All right. Next up, we're going to go with the dude whose name it's kind of hard to pronounce, Henry Toto, out of Alabama. A little bit small, right? I think he was only under 230, transfer from Tennessee. And he's a guy that's played multiple positions as well, right? He played weak side. And did he play middle linebacker for Alabama?
Yeah, put it right in the middle. He's their Mike. Great instincts. A 4-year starter in the SEC. 2 at Tennessee, 2 at Alabama. Surprised he didn't come out last year. He's your green dot defender. Whatever team he gets drafted to, he's going to have that green dot, meaning he can stay on the field in all situations. Better than you think in coverage, just from a footwork, balance, body control, anticipation perspective. And his speed, I think, gets a little underrated. I've seen him run down arguably the fastest player in the draft in Devin from Texas A&M. In that matchup, Texas A&M versus Alabama, Toto was beating him to the sideline. And yes, if you put him in tights and tell him to run 40s, it won't even be close. But football speed shows up at the linebacker position. And I think he's more than athletic enough to be considered a plus athlete for the position, and he's a menace in between the tackles.
Okay. So you're not worried about his overall size in the NFL in the middle.
Nope.
You're not. And look, CJ Mosley, good point, because he doesn't look anything like the linebacker who was at Baltimore. He lost about 15 pounds. So he's probably right around the same weight as Toto, and it hasn't really affected him a whole lot. So
yeah, linebackers are a little smaller than they were 10 years ago. Not by much, but I think that the league is so much about speed and space right now that these guys just move better when they're about that around that 230 to 235 mark.
Because, for instance, the next guy is Jack Campbell, and he's at 243. Right. Where do you see Campbell? Because, again, middle linebacker, but a lot of Iowa linebackers come to the pros don't seem to produce like they did at Iowa.
Yeah.
Oh, it's the scheme, the coaching, whatever, coaching him up, whatever. But he does seem like, because of his size, he seems like the type of kid that no matter where he gets drafted, he's going to be around a long time.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I think if Campbell were in a draft about a decade ago, I think we'd all be considering him a first-round pick because of that size. The measurements I have on him are 6'4", 248, with, I would say, above-average arm length, above-average wingspan for that position. So, yes, he's going to come into the league as a plus-size defender for that position. The question with him will be speed. I think he's going to time well. There is some tightness in the hips, though. Sometimes I think he's a little too linear, meaning that when he needs to quickly change direction and then excel from that spot, there is some slowness that shows up on tape. But when you compare him to past Iowa linebackers, the tool set, the size, it's much better. He has much more NFL linebacker in him, and he carries that same level of instincts, scraping over the top and run defense, and just a really physical downhill guy that the NFL is going to like a lot.
And he's also very smart, by the way. Smart dude. And that helps when you're a middle linebacker.
It does help.
Next guy wasn't on a whole lot of radars when the season began, but he had a very, very good season. Drew Sanders led the team in tackles. Yeah. So what do you like, not only about having Drew Sanders on your list, but having him as high as you do?
So this is an Alabama transfer, an Alabama 5-star recruit transfer, and didn't see the field a ton there in 2 years, goes to Arkansas and got off to a hot start, but you don't want to celebrate it too much. And then you watch him back again in the mid-year, and you're seeing the same level of play. Then you're seeing him at the end of the year, and I'm actually thinking, all right, this kid's getting better as the year progresses. I like that, right? The more experience he got, the more comfortable he got, and he's blessed with outstanding tools. I mean, his physical package is probably, if you're looking at everything combining together, height, weight, length, speed, he's probably got the best combination. And they played him on the edge a lot as a blitzing linebacker and on passing downs. Ended up with 9.5 sacks, 12.5 tackles for loss, but also showed drop back ability. He broke up 5 passes. And, I think the biggest issue on his game is that lack of experience. And that might be an issue for some teams. They might want to draft an early linebacker and say, hey, we need you on our starting lineup week one. And I'm not sure he'll be that guy because of that lack of experience. Where one of the areas that bothers me about him, and I do think this is experience based, a lot of missed tackles.
Okay.
I don't like missed tackles being above a certain point percentage wise, and he was way above it. And so but again, I want to give him a little bit of leeway because I simply think that was just a lack of experience.
Okay. And he fits best as
he could do it all. I think he's better on the strong side. I love him in coverage, but I also love him as a guy that disguises in coverage, lining up near the tight end, but then you could rush him on the outside as a pass rusher. I think the creative defensive minds are going to like him a lot.
Next up is Ivan Pace, Jr., the Miami of Ohio transfer to Cincinnati. You always have to feel good when you're a Miami of Ohio fan and they transfer to Cincinnati just when they're getting good. Anyway, so he steps up a competition, still proves how good he is. Very good pass rushing skills. What do you see from Ivan Pace Jr. at the next level?
Yeah, he fit in pretty well as a pass rusher at Miami of Ohio, but when they moved him to a much higher level of college football, he played more off-ball, in the middle type role, and it was an experiment. And he was probably one of the best transfer portal stories of the year. Right, he goes from probably an undrafted free agent, maybe late round pick, to someone I'm likely going to put in my top 50 overall, and I will be higher on him than what you'll see out there. So if you're searching through other, avenues, you're probably going to see him go a little bit lower. But I want to bring up Malcolm Rodriguez from the Detroit Lions. Went to Oklahoma State. I watched him for 2 years. I thought he would come out 2 years ago. He didn't. Watched him again in 2021. And I loved him. Loved him. But the size was less than he wanted. Yep, too small. And I let some of that get to me. I had a couple people tell me, no way, arms aren't long enough. He can't fight off NFL blockers. He's going to be a late round pick. And he was, right? He was a 6th rounder, but he just made the Our-Lads all-rookie team as an honorable mention guy, meaning he was one of the best 3 linebackers in the NFL among this rookie class right away. And this is what I see in Pace. He's a little short. The arms aren't going to be great. He's pretty bad in coverage. Doesn't have a lot of experience there. But he led the AAC in tackles with 134 and just a machine behind. He was 3rd in the country with 20 tackles for loss from an off-ball linebacker spot. And when you watch that and you know that in the back of your head,
well, how does that happen?
How fast he's so explosive and quick. I'll tell you what, there's a few things. I'm a nerd on this stuff. I can't wait to see what he moves in the short shuttle and the 3-cone at the combine, because it looks like you press a button and he's at his top speed right away. And he plays under the pads of blockers. He's probably going to measure in under 6 foot. He's just a hard guy to get hands on for blockers because he's fast and the pad level is so low to the ground. But when he hits you, he's one of probably 5 guys in this class that I would not want to touch on the football field. He's just he's a bowling ball and doesn't miss a lot of tackles. The biggest weakness, though, and this is a big one for the NFL, he got roasted in coverage. He just didn't do it a lot at Miami of Ohio. And the few looks I saw him at Cincinnati, just no anticipation whatsoever. So we'll see.
So if you have him in your top 50, first of all, where do you think a lot's going to depend on, because again, as you talked about, a lot's going to depend on once you get through this combine and Senior Bowl and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But right now, if it stays the same, let's just say, where do you think he will get drafted? Where do you think you would draft him? Would you agree with them and say, all right, yeah, I think that he'll, like Rodriguez, I think he's going to go a little later, but I'll move up. I'll start taking a look at him maybe a round or 2 earlier. So if they think he's a 6th, I'll get him late 4th or early 5th. Is that kind of how you think? Or would you go all in and draft him as high as you think he deserves to be drafted?
Yeah, that's always tough to answer. It's always a fun conversation to have. I'm looking at, because I would consider him a pretty early starter. Like, I think he could start year 2, maybe towards the tail end of year 1, be a top backup, a key special teamer. I'm probably looking at him as an end of 3rd or 4th round pick. So if I pick at somewhere in the 4th round and he's there and I need a linebacker, I'm taking him. If I'm at the end of the 3rd round and I know I'm not picking again until the end of the 4th, I'd be afraid he wouldn't drop there. So I would even view him as probably one of those last 10 picks of the third round.
By the way, at some point, and this only popped into my head for a couple of reasons. One, because you mentioned a player who it took him a couple of years. Number two, we're talking linebackers. But at some point after the draft and before the season begins, we'll talk about, and we might even bring up several names and such before that as well. But we'll talk about the players, like you talked about the R-Lads all rookie team. We'll start talking about some players that have made impacts, and it could be any position, including linebacker, like a player like Jermaine Pratt, who pretty much just exploded this season. And like, where did that come from? So so we will talk more about that. Just popped into my head because you never know how long it takes. You know, part-time guy, a year or two, and then boom, he becomes a star.
Player development is a real thing, and it's not as common as it probably should be. But teams will draft some of these players and say, hey, this is a 2 or 3 year project before we really think we can get a lot out of him. And sometimes it's even more. So, you know, I think that we can't only look at the first year of a player, not even the first 2 years. And there are cases around the league every year. Well, that third, fourth year, that's where you start to see him blossom.
All right. Papo is next from Auburn, another smallish kind of dude, but also a 5-star recruit. So he immediately came into the college ranks as a top dude. Had a really big 2020 and then had a leg injury early 2021. Missed 8 games. How has he responded since then? Because from what I've seen and heard, he seems to be, I mean, that 5-star ranking was pretty legit. Like, this is like a freak athlete type of kid.
Yep. Freak athlete is right. He was top 10 on the Bruce Feldman freak list. Which is the top freak list in the country. He does a great job with that every year. He's a sub 4.4 guy. He's another one like Trenton Simpson. Like, there's fast linebackers, and then there's guys like this. And it shows up on tape, and it turns into power. That's what I like the most about his style. That, yes, he's probably going to weigh in around 225 pounds, which even in today's league, it's a little small for the position. But that speed is turned into power, meaning the impact he makes when he's running into ball carriers or even blockers themselves, it feels like a 250-pounder is hitting you. So the lack of size can help him move and get through creases and windows. Think of Patrick Queen from LSU, currently on the Ravens, has had an up-and-down career to this point. I think he's playing a little bit better right now. Queen's biggest issue coming out of college was length, 31-inch arms, and that's tough when you're trying to fight off blockers, and it shows up on tape. Papo here, almost 34-inch arms, and it's an enormous difference. It doesn't sound like much. You have to trust me; it matters. And I also think he's a little bit more physical than Queen was. Like, he doesn't shy from contact. He will fill a lane, and the issue with him, similar to what Pace we just talked about. I don't love him in coverage. I think that he's a little too downhill happy. He gets sucked in by play action very easily, misdirection, and a good quarterback can eat that for breakfast. So, but if you want to add speed and an energy stick to your defense, he's going to be on your list.
Ventrell Miller's next. He missed the previous season with a torn bicep injury early on. So how has he responded? Another small guy.
Yeah, he just turned 24 years old, I think a couple days ago, actually. So he'll be a little on the old side, not a lot. Again, it's going to be really common still for another year or two. A little undersized, and he gets a little overwhelmed in traffic, and that can be a red flag. I think some teams are going to say, hey, you're not big enough, and you get overwhelmed on the inside. We can't put you at Mike linebacker. I just saw a lot of rangy tackles in the SEC, hitting guys in space, beating them to the sideline, a high success rate as a tackler. There are some maturity questions, medical issues that I think need to be looked into. He missed his first season because of a suspension, 2017, and then the bicep tendon injury last year. So there's going to be a few hoops he's going to have to jump through in the pre-draft process. I could see him being this high. I could see him being, 7 or 8 spots lower than this as well. But I like his tape. I think that he's always around the action. I love the speed, and he's a great form tackler, which is starting to become more important in the NFL now.
Next up is one of my sleeper favorites, and that's Dorian Williams from Tulane. And you want to know why Tulane had a really good defense? Well, he's right there at the top of the list. I mean, this is just like a stat stuffer. I mean,
Yeah.
this guy just did it all.
Mhm.
And it's not like, again, another player who didn't necessarily come into this season as someone that you were probably thinking would end up in your top 10 list, but
Yeah.
he sure exploded for his final season. What do you like the most about Dorian Williams?
Yeah, well-known guy now. He got a Senior Bowl invite, and that automatically just kind of catapults you into the public limelight a little bit more. So he's no longer can be someone that like only a few of us know about.
Yeah.
But he's a big-time athlete on a big-time frame. The league's gonna like that. How fluidly he moves, how much he can open up his strides, change direction, moving at a top rate of speed. And I think he's gonna easily put on another 10 pounds. He's gonna be one of those guys that just gets bigger and bigger as his career progresses. I could see him starting as a will, and you just let this guy chase and run. Just let pursue the football, good in coverage with really high upside coverage. Similar to I would say Okereke from Indianapolis. He's a free agent this year. He has that same kind of body type minus 2 years, meaning I think in a couple years that's what the kind of player he could be like.
Okay. All right, so you see the rest on our screen, our little ticker there, top 10 and honorable mentions, and Dave will be updating these accordingly. But next up, let's talk about the cornerback position, and it all starts with Kaylee Ringo. So I got to ask you, first of all, because we've talked about Ringo a little bit so far. What did you think about his Ohio State tape? Because I don't know what his percentage was covering Marvin Harrison, but Marvin Harrison was eating up Georgia, and Ohio State might have won that football game had Georgia knocked him out. So what did you think about Ringo in that game and overall the last few games you've seen him?
In that game alone, so let's also keep in mind Marvin Harrison is the best wide receiver in college football.
Sure.
He's not draft eligible, so and even considering that, I thought he did a fine job against him. The touchdown that he allowed was a little bit of a broken play, meaning if you watch the snap from the All-22, I thought Ringo beat him initially, but because Stroud rolled out to the right, and that's always a tough assignment for a corner. Like you can't expect these guys, especially Harrison, to cover him more than 3 to 4 seconds. It's just not realistic to ask that question. It's not fair either. But he really technically was targeted only 2 times, and so you have to go back and really look at the tape from the right angle. Right, the broadcast angle is not going to do it for you. I thought he was awesome in coverage for more than the majority of the game, almost the entire game. His bad snaps, they just simply got exposed on national television. And I was on Twitter that night and said, I told you Ringo can't cover. It's just, it's really hard to evaluate defensive back play from the broadcast angle. There are certain things you can evaluate, absolutely. But if you're trying to get a feel for what you just said, how did he play in that game, you need the All-22 angle. And I thought he played at a really high level. I saw exactly what I wanted to. He's 6'2", 210, but he moves like he's 5'8", 185. When just in the short areas, the ability to change direction, play balance, maintain his body control, those are all really tough traits to play with when you're that big. I mean, he's got the size of a safety. This cornerback class in general is enormous, especially at the top. But yeah, I mean, I think Ringo's going to come into the NFL with probably the best blend of tools. But I think he's also going to come into the league with saying, "Hey, we have a lot to work on because he got penalized a lot. He got penalized a lot. He gets a little grabby. It almost seems like he's not completely confident in himself yet. He gets a little too grabby. He doesn't play the game with his feet, even though his feet are good enough, right? I don't know if he completely knows how to use that size and that length yet. It's one thing to have it, but you need to know how to use it correctly. So, he's going to stay as my number 1 corner. I don't see it changing between now and the draft. But he's not Sauce Gardner. Let's not put that expectation on him.
Where would he have been taken in last year's draft?
I think he would have been after Stingley and Gardner for sure.
Where about?
I would say in the middle of the first round.
Okay. But
right.
This draft, you think top 10?
I do think top 10 of this draft.
Okay.
I do. Because there is no Stingley, love him or hate him, whether you think he did great or not in his first year, as a prospect, I had him graded as a top 5 player. I don't regret that at all. I would still do it again right now. I don't think Ringo would have been graded above him.
Joey Porter is next. And another guy with, he's got good size. He's got the bloodlines as well, which you always like.
Yep.
And what you do like too is he uses the size well because he's a very good tackler. And that's like an added plus. So how close is Porter to Ringo?
Very. He won't pass them because they're actually pretty similar players, but Ringo is just a lot cleaner. Porter is still a little sloppy, but he can get away with it because he's so fast and he's so long. I love the mentality that Porter plays with. It's exactly like his dad. Surprise, surprise. Like, he's confident, maybe a little too confident, but again, you kind of want that at cornerback. You see a lot of quality. This has happened to Jeff Okudah a lot at Detroit. When he gets beat early in a game, you can tell he taps the brakes for the rest of the game. You can tell that confidence isn't there. You have to have a short memory when you play corner, and Porter does. Unless he makes a big play, then he's got a long memory because he'll feed off that for a long time. Porter's a guy that's developed a lot over the past 2 years. The issue coming with him coming into this year with the penalties. He was just similar to Ringo this year, just too grabby with his hands. I think last year he had 11 penalties. This year he only had 3.
Oh, that's big.
So that's a nice jump you want to see. Similar, did not get targeted a lot. So again, teams were just simply afraid to throw his way. So there might still be an issue there. He's going to have to prove that in workouts, and this is the kind of guy I wish was allowed to go to the Senior Bowl. You have to be 4 years out of high school. I think that's the rule right now. Because I would love to see him against NFL caliber wide receivers on plays where they're going to get thrown the ball. Because he just simply didn't get targeted that much in college. But I love him, love the attitude, love the tools, love the lineage as well.
Top 15 or top 20?
I'm going to say top 15.
Okay.
I'm going to be putting together a mock draft for the website probably in the next week or two, and I don't see him escaping the top 15.
Christian Gonzalez is next. So he must have had a really good year for you to have him this high. The Colorado transfer from played at Oregon, of course, this past season. So what is it about Christian Gonzalez's 2022 that made you this excited for the kid?
His tape is so clean. I mean, his techniques are teach tape. This is Joey Porter and Ringo, they need to watch Christian Gonzalez play football, because that's what they need to look like. If they do, now we're talking big time players. Gonzalez, everything about him is just clean. He's sticky underneath. He's probably the best corner out of these top 3 at underneath and intermediate coverage, being able to anticipate routes and play sticky. And the NFL, there are the best passing games. That's where they kill you. It's the short pass game, the intermediate passing game. And this kind of guy, he's the one that you feel confident can do it. I think my biggest question with him coming from Colorado was, can he make plays on the ball? I think he didn't have any interceptions his first 2 years. He had 4 this season. He started to really making some plays on the ball. And, you look at the size, you look at the speed, you have to start asking yourself, what is this kid missing? And, there's an outside shot. There's going to be a team out there that thinks this kid's the best corner in the class.
Wow. What does he need to do in your mind better in order, because you said a lot about what you believe in his talents compared to the top 2 guys. So what is it that the top 2 guys have that he doesn't besides a couple of inches?
I want to see him run. I don't know if he has the top gear that Ringo and Porter have.
Okay.
So if you're going to leave him on an island against DK Metcalf or some of the better vertical threats in the game, I'm not sure if he can keep up with them.
Could he be a nickel then?
He could play nickel. That'd be a big nickel, but some teams are going that direction because the slot receivers are getting bigger now. So that's a good look. I haven't really viewed him as a nickel yet, but that might be one of the best spots for him if he can't run. If he can run, you stick him on the outside.
All right, Cam Smith comes up next. What is it about Cam Smith? And look, South Carolina had a nice little breakthrough at the end of the season, mostly attributed to their offense. But still, what do you like about Cam Smith?
Just really good read and react skills. The ability to put his foot in the ground once he knows what to do and to get from point A to point B from that point is probably the best in the class among these top 5 guys. Just excellent movement in short areas. nothing wasted when he needs to go left and right or when he's coming out of his back pedal. It does not need the extra step. It's something I always look for if they need that extra step or not, because that matters. Those inches are going to matter at the next level more than they did in college. And his footwork there is precise. Needs to control his emotions a little bit better. He was one of the more penalized corners in the class as well. He had 10 penalties in just 11 games this year. Way too many.
Yeah.
And I think some of them are emotion based. There's a couple corners come up that we'll talk about that, you see this sometimes with corners, they kind of straddle that line of being a little too emotional. And I think it can kind of bring the worst out in them when it comes to the penalties.
Blue Kelly, like Gonzalez, had a big year.
Yeah.
So what did he do this year to separate himself from his previous few seasons at Stanford?
He cleaned up his footwork. His footwork was top notch this year. Speed's going to be the question with him. If there's a corner on here that I say, hey, he might need to be more of a zone type scheme or a zone heavy scheme, it's going to be Kelly.
Okay.
Son of Tampa Bay corner Brian Kelly. If you remember back him, I think he was in the 90s. So the lineage and the base knowledge of how to play the position is there, but to actually apply that, some guys just never do. And that's what he looked like coming into this year. But his footwork was much better, and it just cleaned up a lot of the short area, intermediate issues that he had in prior years.
And then taking a look at a few, you've got Devin Witherspoon and Jartavius Martin, both from Illinois. Yeah. That's pretty rare to have two corners in your top 10 in the same draft class.
Yeah.
What about those guys?
Everyone loves Witherspoon, and I'm not as high on him as others. I think it's crazy. We're going to be talking. I'm looking at 10, 11, 12 guys that might all have day 2 grades. I just got asked, now that I'm diving deeper into the cornerback class, I think corner is by far the deepest group in the draft. And Witherspoon, when I say I don't like him, I just don't know if I see a first rounder in him. He's a second round player, downhill explosion, and his physical nature is big time. He's going to be a difference maker on the outside against the run. That's not why you draft corners, but it's another feather in his cap. He's just one of my favorite football players to watch. But I'll tell you what about Martin. This kid's the best tackler of all the corners in the class. He might be the best tackling defensive back in the class. Just 2 penalties the past 2 years combined, and then he just had 1 every year prior to. So again, you're thinking, all right, this guy tackles well. He tackles well, does not get penalized. He was productive. He had 10 pass breakups and 3 interceptions. I think he's just not getting enough publicity because of Witherspoon. In the NFL, that won't be a thing. I think that's more of a thing in the media. You just automatically assume that the one corner from Illinois is the guy that's worth talking about. They can't have another corner, right, worth talking about. You pop this tape on, take the jersey numbers off, I bet you would have a tough time deciding who's the better corner. Witherspoon has a little bit more swagger to him, maybe a little bit more big play potential. But Martin, part of me feels safer with him.
Okay, well, look, you still have time, and it sounds like to me that maybe by the time you do your final rankings, Martin's going to be ahead of Witherspoon.
It's very possible, and I still have a lot of deep diving. I'm pretty much done on the offensive side. That's how I start with our lads. That's how our staff is working. I did all my deep dives on the offense. They're pretty much all done now. Defensively, I'm still kind of like on that first level of getting into these guys. I still have another level to get through, and it's very possible Martin ends up on top.
All right, let's talk about safeties. And at the very top, you have Bryant Branch from Alabama. What stands out the most is his elite tackling ability. From what I've seen statistically, the guy doesn't miss tackles. And he's also a very hard physical player. That combination is very rare.
Tone setter. He can play corner. He can play safety. He can play nickel, all at a high level. If you said, hey, he's only allowed to play corner, what's your grade on him? It's the same. Hey, he can only play safety. What's your grade on him? It's the same. And same thing with nickel. The fact that he can do all 3, Greg, I'm probably going to have him. He's probably going to be the 3rd best defender in the class on my sheet, behind Will Anderson and Jalen Carter.
Wow.
And I think he's going to end up in the top 10.
Okay, now
he is so fast. He is so physical. A little bit of he takes a few too many gambles. He gets sucked in by play action misdirection. Sometimes it helps him. Most of the time it doesn't. That's the one concern I would have on him. But my initial thought on him is he's going to be the third best defender in the class.
Okay, because it sounds like to me that if you're going to get a guy like this, he's better. You'd rather have him roaming around the line of scrimmage more, especially like you said, he's susceptible to taking chances. You don't want him to take chances out there, but a guy that doesn't miss tackles and that could be physical. That's somebody you want close to the line of scrimmage. I don't know exactly what position or exactly how he would be used, but what do you think? What do you think maybe his best position would be?
I would say a strong safety role where you're going to, again, you can creep him up to the line, point of attack. And even in, a lot of defenses now are doing these nickel packages where instead of they bring on a corner, they bring on a third safety.
Yes.
So, and he will not be the third safety. He'll be the number 1 or number 2 safety. But if you are bringing a third safety onto the field, you now could put this kid into nickel. And again, he's closer to the line of scrimmage from that perspective. He can support the run. You can blitz him from there a lot easier without compromising the back end of the defense. That's where I think he's going to be. He's going to be a strong safety / nickel when they have 3 safeties on the field.
Okay. Next up is going to be, and what's the you've already talked up Branch a lot. So what's the difference where Branch gets drafted and your number 2, Antonio Johnson?
Antonio Johnson is a late first, early second round player to me.
Okay.
So it's a pretty
jump.
significant gap. And that's another reason why if there are a few safety hungry teams in the draft and they want the top 1, you're probably going to have to either be in the top 10 or move into the top 10. And that kind of supply-demand situation could bump Branch even up further into, dare I even say, the top 6.
Can Johnson, I know he's 6'3".
Yeah.
But can Johnson also, because it's interesting, when I looked statistically, it said that he played a lot in the slot. 6'3" guys don't play in the slot very often.
Right.
Can that happen?
Right.
Is that still something that's possible, or do you look at him as just more of a strict safety, free safety type?
I think he's going to be more of a safety type, strong safety type.
Strong safety type?
I would not. The Texas A&M program was bizarre to me the past year. I'd even say the past 2 years, and some of their usage out of guys was pretty bizarre. And I don't think he's going to get away with playing against slot receivers in the NFL. I just don't think he's quick and sudden enough.
Okay.
But I love him as a tackler. I love him a guy that can play near the line of scrimmage. And I've seen him drop into deep coverage, whether it's deep cover 2, deep cover 3. And he can do a pretty good job at it. He's a long strider, meaning he might not be the quickest acceleration agility guy, but once he gets moving, he can play with range. Similar to I would say similar to Kyle Hamilton, but not on the same level. Maybe a level below that is where I would put Johnson. And I know Hamilton, we could talk about his 4.6, 4.7 40s, don't care about it. He made a lot of deep plays in coverage at Notre Dame. And Baltimore's using him kind of like in a hybrid spot, come up to the line, drop him back into deep coverage. I think that's the role that Johnson plays at the next level.
And he's had a nice season, nice rookie season.
He has.
Yeah.
Very nice season. They've used him well, too.
So much for the 40 time.
Very well. Yep, yep.
All right, so Jordan Battle, another Bama safety. And look, he had a couple of pick sixes, which is always nice to see a couple of years ago. What do you like about – is he more of the – especially when you're talking about having these two guys on the same team.
Yeah.
You're talking about you have a really good strong safety and a really good free safety. And that was as simple as that, right? Battle was that free safety in Alabama's defense. And because of that, though, he's what? Early second round kind of guy?
Probably early second round. Yeah, I coming into the year, I thought he'd be the number 1 safety, maybe top 15 pick. Not sure he's the athlete for it, and he just did not make a ton of plays in coverage. If you watch his highlight reel, you'll see a couple things, but if you watch him week to week, he just didn't factor in the passing game that much. But with that said, he's the alpha of the defense. He's the leader of the defense. He's the shot caller. He's very assignment savvy. He knows where to go. He knows where to he's like a quarterback of the defense. I can't stress how important that is, that you have someone on the back end that can really direct traffic. And, I think that value alone, in addition to his tackling, and yes, he has had a couple big plays over the course of his career. I'm confident he's going to come in and be a solid starter. I just don't love the absolute ceiling that he could reach. It's just not that high.
All right, another SEC safety, Rashad Torrance from
Yep.
Florida, had a very good 2021. Matter of fact, had a huge game against Georgia that really helped his stock. Another smart kid. What do you think about his 2022 season, and where do you slot him in?
He is like he's a missile. That's every time I watched Florida this year, I just thought he was a missile coming from the back end, inflicting his will and damage on opposing ball carriers, run, pass, everything. He's a gambler. He's had some really bad beats in deep coverage. Is it a lack of speed? I don't think so. Is it a lack of quickness, ability to turn your hips? I don't think so. I just think that he gets fooled and he gets caught looking into the backfield a little too long. And he's not completely cognizant of what's going on to his left and right. So is that going to limit his role at the NFL? I don't think so. I think it's just going to be something that he needs to be coached up on. This is one of those guys that I think if he gets coached up by the right one and they're patient with him, they don't put him in tough spots, right? They limit his snaps weekly, 20, 25 snaps a game early on, right? And kind of ease him into the system. He's got every bit of upside as a first-round pick. And I think he'll go probably around the 45th pick of the draft, give or take 10 picks.
All right, next up is another one of my little sleeper favorites, and that's J.L. Skinner from Boise. And I'm not sure how much more of a sleeper he's going to be once we start seeing him in a few weeks, or everybody gets a look at him, because this guy is huge for the position. I mean, is this? Do you believe that he might be one of the top hybrid players? Could he be that guy? Could be even the reason why a team drafts him?
It could be. I think some teams are going to be a little concerned about the lack of bulk. You know, I mean, he's got the frame. He's 6'4". I think the weight I have on him, I think it was 205, 210. So when you look,
you have it that low? Okay, I had him at 220, but that was last year.
Yeah, let me see what I have. I have 210.
Okay.
6'4", 210.
Yeah, that's the difference. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's the lower body, right? I mean, I think he's broad. He's got a really wide wingspan. He is 82-inch wingspan, 34.5-inch arms. Like, that is ridiculous kind of radius for a safety. Like, that is a tough guy to want to throw the ball in the air, right? Because of what he can reach that other guys can't. But hybrid to me is, can he play linebacker in certain looks? I don't think so, only because the lower body, it's thin. It looks like a track athlete, basketball athlete, and he has a hard time bending. He's not the bendiest guy. So, he's just going to be a big target for blockers to reach his shoulder pads and in traffic and defend the inside run. But he is going to be a factor against the running game. So if that's what the metric is he a hybrid? Absolutely, he could play that kind of role. I think Skinner, similar to Jaron Kearse, who kind of has manufactured a role with Dallas over the past few years of being a menace against opposing tight ends. Those guys are hard to find. Someone that could truly cover a tight end, a Travis Kelce, a George Kittle, they're really hard to find, because you could be a physical defensive back, but you're probably still not long enough. You could be a big linebacker, you're probably not fast enough, right? So J.L. Skinner, he's going to have this radius that I just talked about, that it's 33-inch arms, that the very few guys have that can move like this. So a defense that has had issues, or they're in the same division as one of these top tight ends, that's someone that, like, hey, that might be your role. Go cover Travis Kelce. Good luck. And so I do think he's going to get drafted a little higher than people think, because he's a big-time specialty type player.
Oh, and that's just another add-on. And look, you just don't find guys that play this position with that size. And again, if he's 210 rather than 220, that is a big difference.
Yeah, he can move too, though. I think that's one thing I was impressed by with his tape. Sometimes I don't love this body type, the overly long, skinny, because the high hips, right? Just it's hard for them to move. Like, football is played in short spaces, right? We see the highlights and like the big plays down the field. You got to be able to move left to right in a heartbeat. And most guys with this body type can't, but he can. And I think the NFL is going to see that, and I think it's going to boost his stock a little bit.
What do you prefer using him for? Because he has got playmaking ability, and again, he's extremely physical. So which one do you think because sometimes you can't really have them both in the same scheme.
Right.
But if you had to choose, which one would you choose? His playmaking ability or his physicality?
Good question. I would say the playmaking ability.
That's got
With
a
a
higher
nice,
ceiling. He could
yeah,
translate because that goes a long way on a
yeah, it
defense.
does.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Hey, and every NFL team knows this. Every fan should know this. When you start winning the turnover battle, it's the quickest way to win a football
Yep.
game. There's no metric that quantifies that a win as much as the turnover battle, and that playmaking ability he brings to the table. It's going to get noticed.
Well, Jets might want to keep an eye on him then.
Yeah,
because the
I
Jets
agree.
can use a guy in that exact role. That's what they need on defense.
I'll tell you what, man. Saleh would love him.
Number
Just
one
mentality
need
wise, yeah,
is a guy
You
that
think
can
that's
play in the
number one
middle
need?
of that defense and that can create
Okay.
turnovers.
I love it. I think that's going to be one of your guys.
Christopher Smith. Now, Christopher Smith, because he's been in a lot of big games, maybe we've heard of him a little bit more. Did he underachieve? Or was it because we saw him in a lot of big games that we thought of him as a completely different type of player? He's a good player, but he's not that good.
He's a good player. He'll never be a dominant type player, someone that's just showing up week in, week out. He's small. He's 5'10".
Yeah, we just got through a bunch of big dudes. Yeah.
Yeah, this guy would look like their little brother next to him. 5'10", 31-inch arms, 75-inch wingspan. That's small, all right? If you don't have the numbers in your head, like what's the average? It's well below average. He's played some slot corner. He's played some outside corner, settled in at safety for the past couple of years. Instincts, the ability to read and react and anticipate, probably the best, maybe other than Jordan Battle, who I think is the top instinct safety in his class. So he gets to where he needs to get to at all times. The size is concerning, though. It's really hard and really rare to play safety in the NFL at 190 pounds or less. It's just a number you don't see that often. Even a guy like Budda Baker, he's bulked up a lot since being drafted out of Washington. He's a physical dude, even though he's not that big. I don't think Smith is ever going to be like that. So that's going to bump him down enough to say, hey, he's probably going to be a day 3 pick. Some teams might even cross him off their board for that reason. They might, as fast as you might be, as instinctive as you might be, some teams just don't want that kind of size at that position. But I would still take him and just trust that I'm getting a smart defender on the back end, even if it's in dime-only looks.
All right, Jamie Robinson. Now, he comes over from South Carolina and explodes last year in 2021 with Florida State. Led the team in tackles and interceptions. How did he do in year 2? Do you think he pretty much played the way that you had expected? Or were you expecting a little bit more from him? How'd that go?
He improved his stock a little bit. I came into the draft, into the process saying probably 4th round, maybe 5th. I think he's firmly in that 4th round. It could break into the 3rd, maybe if he works out really well. I think the biggest feather in his cap is the tackling. His missed tackle rate, I talked about earlier with the linebackers, is probably, if I have all my numbers correct, I don't think all of them are completely updated from the year, but he was so far above everyone that he probably is going to grade out as the highest rated tackler in this group.
Okay.
And that's important at that last level of defense. That last level of the defense is the last level. If those guys don't get the job done, we're talking touchdown. Coverage is where I think we were a little concerned with him. Didn't have a great feel, didn't play sticky enough, but that did improve this year. I thought he made some strides with his footwork, which, again, when you really know how to move your feet in coverage, it makes all the difference, right? I mean, you can be the best athlete in the world, but if you don't know how to move your feet, it won't matter. And vice versa. If you give a little athletically, but you know how to move your feet and play balanced and play sure, hit all your points, turn at the right time, it can make up for a lot. And that's where I thought Robinson really improved this year.
And then just want to close out with JaMarr Brown from Penn State. He had a huge year last year in 2021.
Yeah.
So what happened this season? Again, same thing. Did you expect a little bit more from Brown this past season?
I did. He lost to Quan Brisker to the NFL. I think that's what happened, who ended up having a really solid year for Chicago. Similar to Brisker, he's going to test out very well athletically. He's going to test out as one of the faster guys in this group. But simply put, he's not a trustworthy tackler. And when you watch his tape, he's just wrong on a lot of routes. It's almost like he just guesses all the time. And he's got the speed and the range to reach his points, especially on the sidelines, to the sidelines, I should say, from the middle. But the amount of times I see him playing catch-up football, meaning it's like one of those oh shit moments. I effed up. I have to go and make up for it with this speed. It's weekly, and that would concern me a little bit if I'm going to draft him higher than the day 3. Because if I draft you day 2, I want you starting my football team within the year, and I just don't see him as that guy. His basement though is high in that I think he's going to be a stud special teamer, and the athletic ability is there. The size is there. The bulk is there. The power is there. The mentality is there. Just needs to play with better instincts. And that safety, you have a very small margin in that department. If you can't play with instincts, you're just not going to succeed.
Before I let you go, I want to ask you about a few players that, because we kind of ended with a player who didn't really live up to what you expected. Start with, first of all, cornerback. He's in your honorable mention, but I'm assuming you thought he might have been top 5 when the season began, and that's Eli Ricks.
Yeah. I mean, I was told a few weeks ago he was going to the transfer portal, and then something made him come out. I'm not sure what it is.
Okay.
That could be a grade from the draft advisory board saying, hey, you're still viewed as a high pick. So keep an eye on that one. Height, weight, speed is all there. Enough quality tape from his LSU days are there. Had a rough 2022. Didn't see the field nearly as much as I wanted to see him. And when I did see him, I thought he was really rusty. That long legs, high hips, really tough to change direction, played tight. He did start to blossom a little bit towards the end of the year. So Ricks is a guy that the workouts and pre-draft process, the interviews, the combine, is probably going to be his make or break. And if it doesn't shine, meaning he doesn't work out well, he doesn't interview well, I think he's going to disappear into late day 3. But if he can go out there, I think the margin between where he could be and where he ends up, based on what happens in the next month or two, is probably one of the bigger margins you'll see in the entire class, not just corner.
Wow.
If he crushes it, you could be talking about a second-round pick here.
Okay. And then at safety is the kid from Arkansas, Catalan. He's coming back?
He's coming back.
So he had the injuries last year because that was a big blow to their defense. But
that was
if he's
huge.
Healthy, he's definitely one of your top guys for next season, right?
Yeah.
Like a top 10 ranking kind of guy?
Yeah. I need to see him run. There's a few flashes on tape where I just don't know if it's there.
Okay.
But I started, this time of year, you said, all right, I had guys on my stacks that already said they're going back to school. So I do start my 2024 stacks this time of year. And he's the top safety as of right now, if that matters. That he'll probably be the top safety.
And what happened to Malachi Moore? Is he coming back? Because it is a guy that just seems to be like all over the place as far as what you hear he's supposed to do. And then you look at his stats and his playing time, and it's just, okay, I just get confused about how good or how underperforming of a player he is.
He is going back.
So he'll have one more season. Okay, that'll be a big year to prove himself.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, from that program, I mean, love or hate the Alabama corners. I'm on the side. I like them. They get taught. There are some teams in the NFL that do not like how Alabama corners are taught how to play football. I personally, but it does translate to some schemes very well. So that's why it's just like, hey, I'm not even going to acknowledge it that much. The problem here is, though, that there's so much talent at corner in that program that if something happens, right, you're going to get passed by 3 guys. They're all 5-star recruits that play the game the way that Nick Saban does. I thought he would be a transfer portal possibility, but the fact that he's going back, he's got everything you need to be a quality NFL corner at a high level. But again, like you said, you need to see the consistency on tape, especially from that position. You need to see something week to week that he just has not shown yet.
And then lastly, what's up with the North Carolina State linebackers? We know the injury situation.
Yeah.
Was that with Peyton Wilson?
Well,
because Drake Thomas and Wilson.
and Moore, right? The middle linebacker. He's had his share of injuries, and he's kind of like the alpha of that group. But Wilson's had the injuries. Drake Thomas, like we said, I think we talked about him. Love him as a football player.
Yes,
he could be a Malcolm Rodriguez type. I don't know. I don't have him on that as high as that. I just don't know if he has enough explosion in his game to make up for some of the size shortcomings. But he's going to get drafted, and there's going to be coaches that love him. It's a matter of whether or not he really can prove that he can get on the field, right? We had guys talking this same way about Micah McFadden last year from Indiana. Fun player to watch, did everything right, tackle machine, actually crushed his pro day workout, 6th-round pick. It's and now in the NFL he is seeing snaps with the Giants playoff game. He was inactive last week in the first playoff game. He was a healthy scratch. So, but the weaknesses that McFadden has shown this year with the Giants is what I see with Drake Thomas. I see this happening with him. He can't cover. He's just not fast enough in coverage, and he doesn't have a radius to make up for it. The reach isn't there, and that's a huge liability. I mean, most teams are playing with 2 linebackers now on the field. And it does diminish the value of these guys a little bit. I'm still in the camp that if you find a good one or even a good 2, it's going to change your defense because of how much they impact run and pass. But A, they're hard to find, and B, they're easy to kind of shoot to the side if they don't have like that one trait that you need.
All right, so that's going to wrap it up for our early rankings, defense for DBs and linebackers. Again, you can check out our defensive line and edge rushers from our previous show. That was last week. And all of our offensive early rankings occurred before the bowls. So those are all available, of course, on the channel as well. Next up, we are going to dive into early top 3 team needs. So this is going to be real early. It's before free agency, obviously. So there's going to be a lot of changes in those team needs between now and then. But this gives you a little bit of a heads up. And Dave, you're going to get started on that after you post your updated 96, which should come out early next week.
Yeah, I'm gonna have it done this weekend, and the second it's done, I'll send it over. And once they post it, I'll blast it out to you. I'll blast it out on Twitter, and that really can start to get the ball rolling with the first mock draft that we'll do. That'll be coming up now that the underclassmen deadline is pretty much in the rearview mirror now, and it gives us a little bit more clarity on what teams might go after certain players at certain points of the draft.
Yeah, because you'll have the mock draft, and then we'll do our mock draft after we've completed all 32 of the team needs. So it'll probably be the first mock draft on the show. Now, you'll have one posted, in about a week or 2?
I'm hoping within the next 10 days. I'll say that.
That'll be on the rlads.com draft hub website section. And then after that, about another week or 2, we'll have our own mock draft. So I'll throw some wrenches. I'll be a monkey throwing wrenches at Dave's draft board because I'll be picking every other. And I go, not so fast.
That'll be fun.
I'm going to throw somebody you never thought of. Yeah. I can't throw Grayson McCall in there this year, though. I have to wait till next year. So. All right. Anyway, Dave, great job as always. Can't wait to talk team needs. That's next.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that going around, 32 of them. So we'll get started on that real soon. And then everything else that we just talked about. So don't forget, subscribe to the channel, comments, questions, just let us know what you got. All that is awesome. And then again, we'll let you know as soon as we're going to have our first live show, which will take place sometime soon. Maybe even our mock draft show could be a live show. That wouldn't be a bad idea. So Dave, appreciate it. And we'll talk to you probably next week?
Yep. Next week or Friday. Yeah.
Next week or Friday. Sounds good.
Yep.
See you then.
Thanks.